My name is Bhatia, and today it's time of BHIE 145, and we are going to cover in this class Unit 7 and Unit 8. And Unit 7, we have done earlier Unit 5 and Unit 6 and related to European history. And now in Unit 7, we are going to cover industrialization. In industrialization between 1750 to 1850. This is the time period of industrialization occurred in Europe at that time in 1750 to 1850. Next is the introduction. We are going to cover in this in Europe, the period between 1750 and 1850 is regarded as the period of first industrialization. When first industrialization occurred in Europe in 1750 to 1850 time period. During this period, consumer goods industries spread in certain parts of Europe. The growth of capitalism over a long period in Europe resulted in widespread development of industries in modern times. And in this unit, we will discuss the process of industrialization from mid 18th to mid 19th century. Mid 18th to mid 19th century as it occurred in Britain, France, and Germany. Why it occurred in Britain, France, and Germany, the causes and the reasons and the impact of industrialization we will cover in this unit in Unit 7 and 8. Next is characteristics of modern industrialization. Characteristics of modern industrialization. First of all, some technological innovations were present in almost all societies. Craftspersons, artisans, skilled workers were involved in different kinds of manufacture in almost all parts of the world. In some societies, large-scale workshop production was also undertaken to manufacture goods from consumption of kings, aristocrats, and sometimes even for export. It increasingly involved technological changes which led to mechanization and replacement of human labor by machines. Various inventions made possible the replacement of animal power by inanimate sources of energy such as water, steam, and later electrical energy. The people of that particular area, they generate energy from water, they generate energy from steam and from electrical. Next is industrialization in Britain. How? What was the reason behind this industrialization occur in Britain itself? Firstly, Britain was the first industrial nation which was able to sustain a balance between production and population. The balance between population and production. As population increasing, as they were increasing the production also in agriculture area and in all. Next is modern industrialization propelled Britain in an unparalleled position of power in world affairs. And this prompted or even pushed other countries in Europe to industrialize. Between 1750 and 1850, Britain industrialized and became the most developed industrial economy in the world. The time period between 1750 to 1850. The industrialization occurred in Britain, and after that, France and Germany they involved in the same way. And initially, its industrialization was basically geared around cotton textile, iron, and mining industries. They go on at this. Next is the main factors which propelled this first major industrialization were as follows. Number one, agrarian structure. What was the agrarian structure of that particular area and which area? Britain. The crucial characteristic of modern industrialization was the first shift of human and material resources from agriculture to industry. This transformation of English agriculture over a certain period is termed as agricultural revolution. This process started much earlier in Britain than in any other country. It involved four important features. What were the four important features? That were farming in bigger enclosed units, replacing the medieval open fields. Bigger enclosed units, replacing the medieval open field system. Next is absorption of common land for cultivation and promotion of livestock husbandry. Next is ejection of peasantry from the land. Next is their transformation into agricultural workers and big increase in agricultural productivity. Now, according to population, according and with the help of so many tools and technology, they are enhancing their agricultural production at that time. Next is demographic changes and technological innovations. Demographic changes. The rate of population increase in Britain was faster than on the European continent. In any other European country, the population was increasing in Britain was much faster than other. During the 18th century, irreversible growth in population occurred, and the number of people in England and Wales increased almost threefold from about 5.8 million in 1701 to about 14 million to 1831. That is a threefold increment of the population in England and Wales. And what was the century? In 1701 to 1831. Next is technological innovation. How the people of that particular area, they enhancing their technological survey and they enhancing their technological technologies. The practical use of mechanical devices for enhancing production was of revolutionary consequence in the process of industrialization. Various kinds of labor saving machines were designed and tested in production. Spinning jenny was extremely important in increasing the pace of spinning by mechanically twisting the spun yarn, which was earlier done by human labor. Any operative now could simultaneously spin a number of threads. Another important invention was the water frame by Richard Arkwright in 1769, which strengthened the yarn. Next is both these machines were combined in a significant invention by Crompton in 1779. The Crompton's mule completely substituted the Indian technique of manual spinning by making it possible to spin finer and better yarn much faster and at extremely low cost. Combined with water and steam power, this great invention dominated the cotton industry for the next century. These technological innovations in textile industry, which was the pioneer industry of the industrial revolution, that created conditions for saving labor costs, producing faster at cheaper rates. Next is factory system. The factory, which evolved from the manufacturing system of production, was another important characteristic which defined the era of modern industry. Some of the new technological innovations, particularly in spinning, such as water frame and mule, were too large and expensive to be put in artisanal homes. Next is the role of government. The role of government was also significant in creating an overall environment for entrepreneurship, investment, and trade. The British government supported entrepreneurship at all levels, worked towards eliminating internal barriers, providing parliamentary support for enclosure of land, kept the resentment of the dispossessed sufferers in check by maintaining strict law and order, and invested heavily in the pursuit of foreign and military policies. What was the industrialization in France? That we were talking about the industrialization in Britain and the system, what was done behind this, and what about the factory system, what about the role of government. And next, we are going to cover industrialization in France. And after in next unit, we are going to cover elaboration of these all things. In the early 18th century, income level in France was almost on par with Britain. Its pool of scientific resources was equal to Britain, and its population was about 3 times more numerous. Agricultural changes started in France during 1750 to 1760, but they were stalled during the later period when the peasantry became more deeply entrenched in the wake of the French Revolution. We have discussed in our earlier units about the French Revolution and the other factors responsible for the slow pace of French industrialization were scarcity of coal and iron, deposits, a weak banking system, absence of an organized credit network. This was coupled with a much lower demographic growth, relatively high cost of transport, limited internal market, and elite which retain its interest in land as well as in bureaucratic positions. However, compared to Britain or Germany, the pace of French industrialization was slow. Industrialization in Germany. Germany proceeded very fast on the highway of modern economic growth. It acquired an advanced industrial base within a span of about 30 years. Its rate of growth was faster than Britain. And the German industrialization went through 3 phases. Number one, a period of early industrialization from the late 18th century to 1830s. Number two, a period of big surge in industrialization from the late 1830s to early 1870s. And number three, the phase of mature industrialization from 1870s to 1940. These were the 3 phases which was facing by the German people in the front of industrialization. Napoleon's victory over German armies in 1806 and subsequent French rule paved the way for several institutional changes conducive to industrial growth. Foreign companies invested capital in metal and coal mining. Yes, now we are going to cover Unit 7. And we have covered industrialization in Britain, industrialization in France, and industrialization in Germany. If we compare 3 countries, Britain, France, and Germany, then we can say that Germany is increasing and the economic growth and the all things which were done in Germany that was far better than Britain and France, far better because the population increase and the technological increase in Germany that was much better than Britain and France. The growth of these all things in between 1830 to 1914, there were 3 phases they were facing at that time in the matter of industrialization, how they were increasing the production, their technologies very fast than other countries. In our Unit 8, the industrialization, we are going to cover the time period of 1851 to 1914. As we are talking about Unit 7, that was very easy. And the question will come from Unit 7. That was only just the industrialization of France, the what was the condition of industrialization of Britain and the industrialization of Germany. The question will come in your question paper like this. And that will be very easy to solve all the answers in front of all the questions in front of the question paper. Now, in Unit 8, industrialization, that the time period is 1851 to 1914. And what was that? In this unit, we will focus on the growth of industrial capitalism from mid 19th century. Industrial capitalism, how the economy and how the money was increasing, the growth of money, the growth of capitals, the growth of industrial capitalism was increasing at that time in mid 19th century. The manner in which industrialization progressed in England was not repeated in countries like France, Germany, and Russia. What was that? Industrialization progressed. In this unit, our focus will be on how France, Germany, Russia tried to negotiate with the problems on the way to industrial development, how they were facing and how they were negotiating the problems which were coming on the way to industrial development in mid 19th century, and the development of industrial capitalism in these countries since mid 19th century. Industrial capitalism, development of industrial capitalism in these countries, France, Germany, and Russia in mid 19th century. France, industrial capitalism, 1848 to 1870, the time period is this. First of all, after the deep depression of 1847 to 51, there was visible growth in French industry, which was visible at that time in French industry. Therefore, many believe that industrialization started in France after 1850s. Industrialization started in France after 1850s. It was a consequence of the availability of gold throughout Europe during the period following the revolutions of 1848 and continuation of the railway boom until circa 1860. That extensive investment in the standard areas of growth at this time, textiles, coal, iron, railways, they became possible in France. Availability of gold in railway boom and textiles, coal industry, iron industry, and the railways. Okay, on these things they invested so much money on those things at that time in France in near about 1860. This in turn stimulated the changeover from water power to steam power in large sections of French industry, water power to steam power, and a general move away from charcoal centered iron production to coal based production. Charcoal centered iron production to coal based production. The period witnessed the extensive exploitation of the coal deposits of the Nord and the Pas de Calais, which now became the country's prime source of fuel, although much of it was not suitable for smelting since it could not produce coke. Next is in 1852, a total national coal output of 50 lakh metric tons. What was that? The figure is that is very important. Listen carefully. In 1852, a total national coal output 50 lakh metric tons, and the North Basin produced 10 lakh metric tons, compared with 16 lakh 40,000 in Upper Loire. Whereas in 1869, of a national production of 13 lakh metric tons, the North produced 43 lakh compared with 31 lakh in the Upper Loire. Elsewhere, output of pig iron increased dramatically. Steel production increased substantially to 10 lakh tons in 1869, incorporating Bessemer techniques and ranking second to international production to that of Britain. This was the production of that particular area. Next, Germany. The sources of change. The German states until 1871 and thereafter the German Empire also witnessed considerable growth of industrial capital in the North century, 19th century. The character of capitalism in Germany was decisively influenced by official measures that were taken during the period 1789 to 1815. And these measures took the form of copying the French legislation in areas which were under the direct administration of France revolutionary or stellate governments, such as Rhineland and later the Kingdom of Westphalia. These were the sources to change in Germany. How? They changed themselves in German states until 1871. The legislation of Napoleonic period, we have done a lot of things related to Napoleon era and Napoleonic period in our earlier units. Now, this is the time to read about the legislation of Napoleonic period. The industrial settlements of Rhineland saw the dismantling of guilds, abolition of their privileges, which improved the status of competitors in a number of industries and gave greater scope to innovation. What do you mean by guilds? Guild is a system by which a trading unit is working at that time, was working at that time in mid 19th century. Guild was an organization. Okay, guild was an organization of the for the trade, and they organized themselves for trade, and they decided the growth, they decided the money, they decided the rates of exchange and imports and exports related to the particular trade. Guild was the organization of that particular time. Now, the industrial settlements of Rhineland. So, the dismantling of guilds means they wanted to dismantle the guilds because uh, the organization that was known as guild, they enhancing their power at that time. But the industrial settlement, they dismantle the power of guilds and abolition of their privileges which improved the status of competitors in a number of industries, and they gave greater scope to innovation. They innovate their ideas. The competitors were facing the problems, and they were solving their problems in maintaining their industrial settlements in that particular area. The continental system increased demand for the products of this Rhine or this region. Continental system increased demands for the products of this region, and the deposit French exactions, French exactions, the towns of Jülich, Krefeld, and Aachen, and the Wupper Valley, and the Duchy of Berg witnessed a boom in 1800s. Yes, these area, which towns? Jülich, Krefeld, Aachen, Wupper Valley, and Duchy of Berg. These towns were witnessing the bloom in 1800s. Travelcock points out that between 1800 and 1807, the number of Aachen's woolen factories increased by a factor of 5. Woolen factories in 1800 and 1807. They increased by a factor of 5 and exported extensively to Russia and Spain. They exported their woolen products extensively to Russia and Spain. Next is Zollverein. What was Zollverein? The customs unit is known as Zollverein. Zollverein. This is the German word, and we are talking about the German also. Okay. Crucial also to economic growth after 1815 was the gradual development of large regional markets. Large regional markets in 1820s before the formation of Prussia-centered Zollverein in 1834. Russia. We are talking about Russia over here, and the Zollverein is a custom unit in the Russia. Mm, no, we are talking about Germany. Prussia was the old name of Germany at that time. The custom unit is known as Zollverein, and the crucial role of economic growth after 1815 was the gradual development of large regional markets because they were developing their large regional markets in 1820 and before the formation of the Prussia centered Zollverein. Zollverein custom units in 1834. This development removed hurdles facing distribution of manufactured goods in the area of German states. What were the problems they were facing at that time? A phenomenon which dampened the growth of industrial capitalism in the area since the only alternative for producers was protected French market or the excessively competitive English market. Yes, the German states were facing so much problems. They were facing so much hurdles, and when they were developing themselves, they they removed their all hurdles, and after removing their hurdles, the German states a phenomenon which dampened the growth of industrial capitalism in the area since the only alternative for producers was protected French market. They protected French market or excessively competitive English market. They were the competitors at that time. Next is the railways. And if we are talking about the development of any country, then railways played an important role for that particular topic. Railways. Number one, within such a system of trade agreements, such system of trade agreements, the development of railways in the German states acted as a major stimulus to production and innovation in the enclaves of iron and coal production in Silesia and in Rhineland. Silesia. We can say this Silesia and in Rhineland. What was that? The production of coal and iron. They played a very important role for the development of railways because if we are talking about the production, if we are talking about the development of railway, the production of coal and iron was playing an important role for this. And we are talking which areas, Silesia and the Rhineland in Germany, in German states. Railway lines allowed the extension of a home market. Extension of a home market. Because if they wanted to export and import, they enhance their railways, and the railway lines were getting involved in that particular area. That means they are developing themselves in the home market, which was responsibly well knit around the internal river system. They were knitted, means they were combined railway lines and the river system. They based around the Rhine and the Elbe and the Oder, and all of which had canal networks working off them. Rhine and Danube, they were the most important rivers for the trade system. If the Germans, if the people of that particular area, they wanted to enhance the trade system, and the Rhine played a very important role for the enhancing development of industrialization. Rhine, Elbe, and the Oder. They were the important rivers, the key rivers. They were playing a key role in front of the railways, in front of the trade, and all of which they had canal networks working off them. Means river side by side, the canals, they played very important role at that particular area. By 1850, and 3,660 miles of track were in operation. The expansion continued exponentially thereafter. By 1850. And what if we are talking about the railway started in India? The railway started in India in 1853. And the first railway line of India, that was Bombay to Thane. If we are discussing about the history of Europe, then we are talking about the railways, and we are talking the time period like 1850. 3,660 miles of track that was in operation. Okay, that was in working at that time, and the expansion continued exponentially thereafter. Next is the growth of joint stock banks. Okay, next, industries are getting involved, production getting involved, railways getting involved, and now for this the economy enhancing, but without capital the economy is not in work. Much of this expansion was possible because of the development of joint stock banks in German states on the model of credit mobilier in Paris and Society Generale in Belgium. Paris and Belgium with German states with the help of joint stock banks, and they help in enhancing the capital, they help in enhancing the money to each other, and without money that is not possible at any cost. What about the development, the growth? With the formation of Bank of Commerce and Industry, a new model for capital investment was established. A new model, which was for capital investment. The people will invest in the particular area, and the banking system and the commerce system and the industry system, they will establish at that time. It faced immense opposition from Rothschilds, who stood against it in the Frankfurt Senate. It faced immense opposition from Rothschild. No, sorry, the slip of the tongue. What is that? The Rothschilds. Opposition from Rothschild, who stood against it in the Frankfurt Senate, and it also faced discouragement from Prussian civil servants who were content to see investment dominated by Chef Hussein, Bankvarian in the Cologne. That is the German words, Chef Hussein, Bankvarian in Cologne. What was that? Immense opposition from Rothschilds. They stood against Frankfurt Senate, and they faced discouragement from Prussian civil servants. Prussian, that was the old name of German at that time, Prussian civil servants, who were content to see investment dominated by Chef in Saint Benverian in Cologne. That is the name of the place. Now, the growth after 1871. What was the what was the position? What was the condition of growth after 1871 in Germany? And after the creation of German Empire in 1871, steady growth in industrial production, steady growth, slow and steady growth in industrial production, which followed the boom of 1852, continue unabated. The payment of indemnity from France after 1870. The payment of indemnity from France after 1870 ensured high level of public expenditure to reinforce the stimulus provided by the increasingly inaugurated market in the Zollverein. They wanted to expand the market system in Zollverein. High rate of growth in net domestic product have been noted for the 1870 to 1874 period. Gründer Zehre, Gründer Zehre, foundation years, that is a word of Germany, of Deutsch language. Foundation years of the empire. What was the foundation year of the empire? 1870 to 1874. When the growth was in net domestic product have been noted in German Empire. Next is the role of the state in Russian industrialization. The role of the state in Russian industrialization. What was the role of the state? The state means the particular power, the particular empire in Russian industrialization. If Russian industrialization is enhancing, what was the role of the state at that time? That is, it was trying to explain the advance of industrial capitalism in Russia from 1890s has been characterized as a process of the late development because it occurred several decades after industrialization in England, France, and Germany. Advancement of industrial capitalism in Russia. What was the time period? From 1890s. That has been characterized as a process of the late development because it occurred several decades after industrialization in England, France, and Germany. After England, France, and Germany, that turn comes in Russia. That was the main reason behind the late development of Russia after from 1890s. Late industrialization offered Russia the benefit of borrowing rather than originating industrial strategies. Russia was borrowing the development rather than originate industrial strategies. No, Russia was not making the strategies for industrial development. Russia was borrowing. It was borrowing the benefit from France, England, and Germany. Yes, that was the main reason. We can say late industrialization, but Russians were not facing that much defeat, in front of them, Russians. The main problem confronting the Russian state was how to pursue her aspiration to be a great power in Europe within inadequate resources to sustain this chain, this claim. Yes, Russian state, they confronting the problem because how they pursue her aspiration to be a great power in Europe. Wanted, but this was not adequate resource to sustain this claim. That's why it is written inadequate resources to sustain this claim. This imbued Russian industrialization with a strongly political complexion throughout its history, even into the Soviet period. The backwardness of Russian economy and social systems legitimized state intervention more than anywhere else in Europe. This is particularly valid for the first but short lived attempt towards industrial growth launched by Tsar Peter the Great. Tsar Peter the Great, the time period is 1689 to 1725. Here it is written the Russians economy was backward. Social system was backward. They wanted to intervene more than anywhere else in Europe. As their social system, their economy was backward. After that also. This is particularly valid for the first but short-lived attempt towards industrial growth launched by Tsar Peter the Great. What was the time period? 1689 to 1725. Tariff, which was a type of tax, were relatively low in Russia between 1850s and 1870s. Tariff was low. Tariff taxes was very much low in Russia. That's why the economy was not that much fastly enhancing at that time. During this period of low tariff, imports rose substantially. Imports means from outside country we are going to import so many things from our in our country. Tariffs. Russian industries could not compete with West European industries. They could not compete with West European industries. The state therefore provided protection by setting tariff rates for imports and exports. The state that because the state played a very important role in economy, in society, in religion, and all things. State played a very important role. That's why the state therefore provided protection by setting tariff rates for exports and imports. Exports and imports. By keeping tariffs low, the Russian state sought to stimulate light industries to meet popular demand rather than heavy industry whose demand would come from within the industrial sector. In 1877, in 1888, in 1884, 85, and 87, import duties were raised to protect metallurgical and mining industries. That is a very beneficial for the Russians because they enhance their import duties. They enhance their tariffs. Just when somebody will come for the import in Russia, okay, then they raised their import duties just to protect metallurgical and mining industries. Yes. Next is the Gerschenkron model. What was the model of that particular area? Alexander Gerschenkron, whose account of Russian industrialization is highly influential, devised a model to explain Russian industrialization in particular and industrialization in conditions of economic backwardness in general. Alexander Gerschenkron accounts of Russian industrialization, highly influential, devise a model to explain Russian industrialization, in particular in which industrialization in condition of economic backwardness in general. Generally, he was explaining about the economic backwardness of Russia. Who? Alexander Gerschenkron. More strongly, its industrialization tended to start as sudden great spurt, proceeding at a relatively high rate of growth of manufactured output. More strongly, industrialization of Russia to start a great spurt proceeding in a relatively high rate of growth of manufactured output. The more backward the country, more pronounced is the stress of bigness of plant and enterprise. More backward the country, more pronounced is the stress on bigness of plant and enterprise. The more backward the country, more pronounced is the stress on producer goods as against consumer goods. Producer goods they were enhancing as against consumer goods. This was the much and more backwardness of the country of that particular area. They pronounced the stress on producing goods and they against consumer goods. Industrial trends from the 1860s to the 1890s. Industrial trends. Now, late 1860s and early 1870s, they saw a considerable boom in the growth of industrial output and trade turnover, the founding of joint stock companies, and the expansion of the railway network. From 1873, under the impact of a general European crisis, the Russian economy experienced a crisis of overproduction, falling prices, failure of numerous industries, and bank facing problem. The importance of peasant consumer was highlighted by shrinking markets caused by poor harvest and famines in the first half of 1870s. In 1877, under the impact of Russo-Turkish War, industry was stimulated by military orders as well as the good harvest of 1878 and 1879, which led to record grain exports. Industrial development went into decline from 1882 until 1885. That is very important and listen carefully, students. Industrial development went into decline from 1882 until 1885. There was another recession affecting most sectors in 1890s and its effects were sharpened by a catastrophic harvest failure and subsequent famine in 1891. Harvest failure and famine. This was expressed in slower rates of formation of new shareholding capital and railway network in the closure of factories and mass unemployment. Industrial output doubled between 1862 and 1882, which implied an annual average growth rate of 3.5%. Between 1860 and 1890, coal output leaped up to 2005%. Iron and steel production as well as petroleum extraction quadrupled. In the 1860s, the Russian government was apprehensive about industrial development because the ensuing tension from worker unrest would strain the fabric of a largely agrarian society dominated by the nobility. The Witte system. The Witte system. Count Sergei Ulvaich Witte, Minister of France and first Prime Minister of Russian Empire, identified the taproots of industrial strength in railways and heavy industries. Yes, they wanted to enhance their interest into railways and heavy industries. Who? Russian Empire. Prime Minister of Russian Empire. The Witte system was characterized by tariff protection, monetary stability, financial reform, heavy taxation, encouragement of foreign investment. Witte system. Measures were undertaken by them to improve budgetary balances, stabilize the ruble, and increase foreign investment. Fast growth, revenue, and taxation. They wanted to enhance, they wanted their fast growth and they wanted to enhance revenue and taxation at that particular area. Railway construction dominated industrial upsurge of 1890s. The length of track almost doubled so that 37% of entire network or one half of what was built in preceding 50 years was constructed during the 1890s. The total inventory of railway rolling stock also doubled between 1890 and 1900. Annual additions to the railway capital stock usually exceeded additions to the industrial capital stock between 1890 and 1905. And it was investment in rail and rolling stock that generated demand on a scale broad enough to sustain the new iron and steel industry in the Ukraine and the engineering industry in St. Petersburg. Next is revenue and taxation. Witte needed to support his industrial policies by measure to bring in more revenue and to stabilize the value of the ruble. Most of the 1890s were good years for borrowing abroad because the rate of interest was low. By converting expensive domestic loans to cheaper foreign loans, he was able to reduce expenditure by over 1 billion rubles. Witte strove to preserve the favorable balance of trades secured in the 1880s by continue a highly protective tariff industrialization 1851 to 1914 policy and encouragement of import substitution by direct state support for Russian industry by means of tax remissions and guarantee of profit. The role of foreign capital. Foreign supplies of capital were indispensable to make good an inadequate supply from domestic sources. By encouraging its inflow, Russia had become Europe's largest debtor nation by 1914. Largest debtor nation. Who? Russia. The proportion of Russia's national debt The proportion of Russia's national debt that was held by foreigners rose from 30% to 1895 to 48% to 1914. National debts. Possibly one half of this foreign investment accounted for state railway loans. Industrial capitalism from 1901 to 1914. Industrial capitalization. Monopolistic devices. Growth years of 1908 to 13. Russia in 1914. Industrial capitalization. The spurt of 1890s came to an abrupt end in a recession that began in 1901. This meant that capital expenditure by government in industry could not be maintained at the level of 1890s, while its balance of trade and payments were adversely affected. Monopolistic devices. Crisis in Russia industry stimulated the growth of various monopolistic devices for regulating production and sales. In each sector, syndicate the larger firm was formed. This movement spread rapidly from 1910 to Above all, an industry is dominated by foreign capital, and by 1914, there were over 150 such organizations. They controlled not only mining, metallurgical sectors, but also certain branches of light industry, like textile and sugar. The growth years of 1908 to 1913. How the growth? You can see on screen the rapid rate, the rapid extension, the rapid expansion of the proper particular area. Expands. All sources agree the last 5 years, 1908, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, were the years of steady, even impressive growth in both growth, industry and the agriculture. Russian industry again expanded between 1908 to 13. The output of pig iron rose. This continued to the output of large-scale industry rising from 1908 to 1913 at an annual average rate of more than 9% of current prices and more than 7% in the 1913 prices. Prices arose, production arose, industry area arose, agriculture arose, rapid rate, possibility that pig iron arose. So much things were growing in the development of the industrialization. Russia in 1914. What was the growth in Russia in 1914? Because if we can talk about Russia, the development was slow and steady in Russia at that time. But what about 1914? In the last year before military hostilities disrupted economic activity, Russia remained predominantly an agrarian country. Agriculture claimed bulk of population means more than 85% in rural areas, means population lived 85% population lived in rural areas, employment 67%, and the people who were employed in the particular area in Russia was 67%. National income more than 70% at that time. And the burdens of backwardness, the burdens of poverty, the burdens of illiteracy in Russia were essentially born with the peasants. Goldsmith has estimated that from 1860 to 1913, Goldsmith, gold makers, has estimated that from 1860 to 1913, gross industrial production annually grew by about 5% and per capita production by about 3.5% increasing. The Goldsmith were estimating that, and the time period in which they were estimating. These were high rates of growth industrialization. 1851 to 1914, these were the high rates of growth industrialization to maintain for half a century in that period of history. We have discussed about Russia. We have discussed about the growth years, the growth in Russia, the growth years. We have discussed about monopolistic devices. We have discussed about industrial capitalism from 1901 to 1914. Discussed about fast growth, revenue, taxation, role of foreign capital. We have discussed a lot of things related to the industrialization, and now we are going to off this class. Thank you. Have a nice day. We will meet in another class with Unit 9 and Unit 10. Thank you. Have a nice day.